There's a new president of hockey operations and GM in town, and we're going to talk about that with someone who knows better than most people all about Don Waddell on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, over on YouTube and the SXM app. I also have to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more because right now, new customers are going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. You will notice if you are watching this on YouTube that there is another person in the studio with me, and that's right, it's a Squadcast. We have got Zach Martin, host of Locked On Hurricanes, who I believe has only been hosting Locked On Hurricanes for about a month, but is doing a great job. And I thought, who better to come and get the inside scoop on new Blue Jackets president of hockey operations and GM Don Waddell than someone who's been watching his work for the past little while. So, Zach, welcome on into Locked On Blue Jackets. Welcome to the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's talk about GMs. Because I guess the first question I think should be, how excited should Blue Jackets fans be about Waddell being in charge?
Well, first, thank you, Jay, for the invite, and thank you for being with Locked On. Yeah, it's been a ride since I think first episode was early April. So yeah, it's been a little bit, but no, definitely enjoying it. In terms of Don Waddell, if you're a Blue Jackets fan, I would definitely be excited because you look at the track record that he's had since becoming, he's with the Hurricanes since 2014, jumped on as president of hockey ops at the time. And then 4 years later in 2018, he becomes the general manager of the team. And that's right around the same time you get Tom Dundon as, the new owner. Rod Brind'Amour becomes your head coach. And then you look at 6 straight years of making the playoffs, 6 straight first round wins, 3 division titles, back-to-back times, 2 Eastern Conference final appearances and stuff like that. Of course, they didn't win, but I mean, hey, you still got to the dance. You got there as far as you could and stuff like that. And you're talking about a guy who's got a plethora of experience. Former Atlanta Thrashers GM for a long time before they got relocated to Winnipeg. He was an assistant GM for the Red Wings back in the late 80s, only for a season, but still he's got connections with Ken Holland and, just other guys around the league too. So you're talking about a guy who's pretty savvy at what he does, and he knows how to collect a lot of news, a lot of info, and just has a really good relationship with a lot of GMs around the league and other hockey ops guys. So you're probably looking at one of the best, or I would say top 5 GMs of all time, even in just recent history of just how good he's been. You can see the track record of building really good teams in Carolina, and hopefully the same thing happens in Columbus, because I know you guys definitely deserve something, because I know it's
literally anything. Yeah,
literally anything. And of course, I say that as someone who is from Northeast Ohio and also is a Jackets fan too. Outside of my Canes. So yeah, I'm hoping we get a little love out there in in the Buckeye State for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's next for Carolina and that whole, because obviously you guys are now looking for a new GM, but
yeah.
How was the feeling for Don Waddell leaving Carolina? Because it seems a little bit obviously, it all moved very fast. I feel like it was Tuesday he interviewed at Columbus, Thursday he resigned from Carolina, and then Friday it was unofficial that he was going to be the new guy in Columbus. What was the feeling about him? Is it kind of, are you upset that he's gone, or are you kind of excited for the new phase? What was the feeling about Waddell no longer being the GM in Carolina?
I would say it was definitely more of a shock, because you look at the fact that you're talking last Monday, he's doing his end of season, interviews with Rod Brind'Amour, and they're talking about what, their priorities are in the offseason, looking for a right shot center. You got to talk about the UFAs. They got Jake Gensel and Brady Shea, Brett Pesce, your RFAs and Martin Nietzsche's, which everyone and their mother has him on their short list right now, and talking about Seth Jarvis. And then, like you said, Then you hear Thursday night, I think it was Edmonton, Dallas. It was like game 1 of the Western Conference Final. Pierre LeBrun and Elliot Freeman are like, oh yeah, by the way, he interviewed Columbus. And you're like, wait, timeout. Wait, what now? Then you hear the Friday morning, oh yeah, Don Waddell resigns. And it's like, of course, for me, I put an episode out 3 hours later. Hey, it's official.
That's how it goes.
It's like, come on. But yeah, I would definitely say at first it was a bit of a shock because I don't think anyone really saw this coming. The fact, like I said, he's doing his end of season presser, talking about what's next for the Hurricanes, talking about Ryan Brind'Amour's contract, what they're going to be looking for in the offseason. And the next thing you know, he's no longer the GM. And of course, a lot of people had some great stories to tell, interactions with Don. He's sitting in the stands talking to people. He usually walks around the concourse and, talks to fans and stuff like that. He was a genuine guy who, I think a lot of people were happy with how he built the team. And of course, it's, there were some, free, like trade deadlines, free agent signings. You're kind of like, okay, you kind of wish you did a little bit more on, but overall he did a really great job. And I think a lot of people really love Don Waddell, and it's sad to see him go, but that's the nature of the business. He can't stay forever, but I think it's more of like shock and then appreciation. And now it's more of like, okay, who's possibly next? So yeah, you're going through those like phases of like, okay, didn't see that. But here you go. I didn't have that on my big card off season.
It all happened very, very fast.
Very fast. Then for you guys. Wild. Yeah, I mean, I have to ask you, like, how was it for you guys on your side of things? You see Thursday night, okay, he's talked to Columbus. Now he resigns, and then you're talking like what? Now it's Tuesday, and it's officially official. He's now your new president of hockey ops, or GM, alternate governor. Like, what's that been like for you guys? You're seeing the whole process over like a span of like 4 or 5 days.
It was really interesting because it felt like obviously Kekalainen was fired basically at the end of the season, near enough, or very shortly afterwards. And then there was a lot of, well, they've got a long list of guys and this is going to be a detailed search. And then, obviously there was a lot of guys that they were looking at were still in the playoffs. And, so Matthew Dash for the Lightning. And, Don Waddell was not the guy in Carolina that everyone was looking at. People were like, is this time for Tulsky to be a GM of his own, and we'll talk about Tulsky in a minute, I'm sure. And then these names started coming out, like Mark Bergevin interviewed for the position, and I was like, please, God, no. And then
Ken Holland.
And I was like, that's even worse.
It's like, no, please, no.
And so, like, when it came out, they were like, Don Waddell's been interviewed for the position. I was like, that's a brand new name that I hadn't considered. And so I started digging around. I asked a couple of people. I have a couple of friends that are Hurricanes fans, and I asked them, a couple of very smart people around the league. And I was like, oh, okay. This might be a good thing. And this kind of leads into what I wanted to ask next, actually, which is he's a really interesting choice. I'm interested to see what he's like when with hands-off ownership. And the thing for me about Don Waddell is he's very good at hiring smart people, which I think is an underrated GM skill. So after the surprise of like, oh, a brand new name, I thought about it and was like, oh, actually, I like this name. And then obviously, like, I think 48 hours after his name was first mentioned, everyone was reporting that he was the guy. Then the holiday weekend happened and we all had to sit there and wait for 3 days. And then it finally came out at, I think, about 2 p.m. Eastern today, while I was asleep, because of course, the Blue Jackets only break news while I'm either asleep or on a plane. So,
I mean, it's like they got a tracker. You're like, all right, Jay's finally asleep. Let's break some news. I was
on a plane when they hired Babcock last year, and now I'm scared to get on a plane again in case something happens. So, but I want to talk a little bit more about both Don Waddell and about what's next for Carolina. So we're going to do that after a quick break here on this Squadcast edition of Locked on Blue Jackets and Locked on Hurricanes. First, I'm going to tell you all about FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers are going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. What I like to do is just go in and look at the heaviest favorite that I can, like whether that's the Nuggets winning in the NBA playoffs, whether that's the Stars winning the Stanley Cup. I don't know. Whatever the heaviest favorite is, just put $5 on it. And if you win, you get $150 to spend on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. And it doesn't even have to be NHL or NBA. Literally any sport you can think of, FanDuel has that for you as well. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets and Locked On Hurricanes. We're doing a Squadcast today and talking all about Don Waddell and also kind of what's next for Carolina. So I just want to finish off with one final thought on Don Waddell, which I kind of touched on a little bit in the first segment, which is Don Waddell. There's a lot of, and I think the reputation that the Carolina Hurricanes have for being cheap is kind of exaggerated for laughs on social media most of the time. You know, we've all seen it. Social media is just kind of like that, you know, and I do think it is exaggerated. I think there's probably a little bit of truth in there. And I talked to a friend about this, and she was like, well, Tom Dundon just has ideas of what is too much to spend on something. Like, he has very hard lines on things, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But Blue Jackets ownership is kind of the complete opposite. They are kind of hands off, almost to the point of like neglect sometimes. So I'm really interested to get your thoughts on what you think about Don Waddell as a GM with an owner that is not nickel and diming him, but it feels very much like he's just been given a blank checkbook and can just kind of do what he wants, as opposed to in Carolina, where it's very much like Tom Dundon has to sign off on basically everything he does. Like, how do you feel about Don Waddell finally not being free, but having a little bit more freedom to kind of spend a little bit more money?
Yeah, no, it's totally fair, and I agree with you. It's like it's at this point, it's kind of for the lulls of the Carolina being cheap, because if you look at the Hurricanes overall, they do spend to the cap almost every single year, and yeah, there's some phases of things where, you know, Tom Dundon's kind of like, okay, we don't really need to spend all this extra money on things that we like. You know, we don't have a radio guy anymore. Now our radio side of things is our TV broadcast of, you know, Mike Maniscalco and Trip Tracy, and of course, everyone knows like the whole breakup of the Checkers and the Hurricanes and stuff like that, and how COVID kind of related into that, all that stuff too. So I would say cheap is kind of overused a whole lot, because guys do get paid. I mean, Sebastian Aho's got a pretty good contract. Andrei Svechnikov, as much as just very Kotkaniemi, you take that as you will. But I mean, there are guys do get paid in Carolina. And then of course, Don Waddell even said it too. Like he even knows that players and agents are kind of like, okay, it's not really fair and how things get viewed, but they do a lot more analytics. And that's the thing I don't think a lot of people know about, is the Carolina views its players with a lot of more analytics than people think of. So that's why you see deals getting done differently in Carolina, is because they're looking at harder fact numbers of, all right, analytically, this is where you're at and all this stuff. So that's kind of what plays into it, which I don't think a lot of people know about. Now, that being said, like you said, now you're going to Columbus with owners that are more of kind of like, do what you need to do. And now it's like, okay, are you looking at, more money getting thrown to players? Are you talking about going to get guys and, making some bigger splashes, making moves that, could benefit the team right away? And, certain guys getting extensions. So like I said, I'm really curious to see what Columbus is okay with Don Waddell doing, because it seems like he's got almost a free reign in terms of, all right, here's hockey ops, here's the GM job, just go and build us a team. And that's almost what it seems like. So I could see him trying to pull some master classes of, all right, let's go trade for this guy, go trade for this guy, go sign this guy. Because, I mean, if you think about it, he got Nino Niederreiter from the Wild for Victor Rask for a straight up, and you're like, wait, what? And then you
underrated fleecing, I feel like.
Yeah, well, when you go get Max Pacioretty and Dylan Coghlan for future considerations, and it's like, wait, what? That's it? Yeah, that's pretty much it. And then, they go get Brent Burns and stuff like that too. And yeah, they got some good signings. Michael Bunting didn't last very long in Carolina, but it was a good pickup. Same with Dmitry Orlov and all that stuff too, and all these other guys. I mean, they went and traded for Brady Shea. And it's one of those things where, given the fact that he doesn't really, he has more, like you said, freedom, more of like, here, go build us a team. I think you're going to see a lot of him being the guy with the connections to go and start plucking guys. Like, all right, I'm going to go trade for this guy possibly. I might go get this guy in free agency. And if ownership's okay with spending up to the cap, because I don't know how the Jackets usually are in terms of where they're at within the frame of, they're not the now former Coyotes, where it's like they're like more allergic to the cap. They're like, oh, let's stay closer to the cap floor as much as possible, but also be under it. But they're not going to be like, here's the Toronto Maple Leafs, and here's like 4 guys and a bunch of dudes. So I don't know where you guys are at in terms of how Jackets ownership is okay with spending money, but if they're okay with letting him do his job and go get the best team possible, I can definitely see him, working his magic with all the connections he has around the league.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be interesting. He's got a lot to do. I was joking on yesterday's episode where he like looked at all of the UFAs in Carolina and they needed re-signing and was like, nope, somebody else's problem. And then immediately comes to Columbus, and I'm like, oh, actually, here are 7 key RFAs that need re-signing. So it's going to be real busy for Don Waddell. Basically, as soon as he gets here.
Well, and plus all those contracts, you guys get Severson's contract and Provorov too. So you're like, have fun.
Trades that need to happen. He's got to figure out the coaching situation. Is he going to hire a GM? Like, there's a lot. His to-do list is very, very long, and he hasn't even like moved into his new office. So it's going to be
it's like
go couple of weeks for him, I think.
Yeah, go get your AGM, go get your coach, go get your go get the guys you need to make the. It's like it's a. What's your goaltending situation going to look like? Defense, offense. Yeah, it's just. I mean, hey, you know what? At least you got the Cleveland Monsters.
This is true. We love Cleveland Monsters on this show. The only team that respects me.
Hey, as someone who grew up like an hour south of Cleveland, I get that. It's like, hey, you know what? Right. At least the Monsters are going to take care of you, I guess.
I want to talk a little bit about the Hurricanes. Which seems only fair. We talked a lot about Columbus. Let's flip over. I want to talk a little bit about the Hurricanes. New GM hunt.
Mm-hmm.
How surprised are you that that Eric Tulsky was given the interim GM tag and not immediately promoted? Is that something that should that worry people? Because I know Tulsky is like the guy in NHL circles that hasn't been given an NHL GM job yet. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people thought, well, this is his summer. There was a lot of conversation about him with Pittsburgh last year. And then obviously with Columbus this year, there was a lot of talk about, well, is Tulsky going to go and leave Carolina? Obviously they got the other guy out of Carolina, but how do you feel about Eric Tulsky kind of getting that interim tag and not the full-time GM tag?
I mean, I've said it on social media. I know you probably saw it, Jay. I think it's more of like a due diligence thing where it's like they're actually going to be like, here you go, here it is. But from what I've heard from Elliot Freeman and Jeff Merrick on 32 Thoughts, like Tom Dundon really respects and, favors what Eric Tulsky and his word is and what he does. Because if you really look at the last few years, Don Waddell was the GM, but you could tell that there was a lot of Eric Tulsky, Darren York, the AGMs with the Hurricanes. They were a lot more involved than what people think they were. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if it's like, okay, we have this list. We're going to interview guys and you get some information, see what's possible. But I wouldn't be surprised if Eric Tulsky doesn't get the name. I guess they just don't want to be like, here you go, here, then go do your. I think it's just more of like, okay, we're going to see what's out there. We're just going to let you still do your thing. You're still going to get help from Darren and figure it out from there. But I know a lot of people are kind of like, wait, why? It's just they just want to venture other options. They don't want to, just be automatically like, all right, here you go. But I mean, he's been here since I think 2010 or 24. He's been with the team for so long at this point. I think it's almost 2014 as well. Came in as as a advisor and then became a hockey analyst and then head of hockey analytics and strategy, and then assistant general manager since 2020. Former hockey blocker, because I know that's the joke that everyone's loving right now, is the fact you got a former hockey blocker from Philadelphia who's now a GM. So but I mean, he'll be a great option. Like you said, Columbus looked at him. I think even Toronto at one point was looking at him too. So he was on a lot of people's short list of the guy who could be in, because he's probably one of the smartest guys out there. And if, if I'm Tom Dundon, I guess you don't want to really make the guy upset unless he's okay with being an assistant general manager and kind of be more behind the scenes, and that's fine. But I wouldn't be surprised if he gets the interim tag taken off at some point and they're just doing their due diligence.
Yeah, that actually follows on to the question that I'm going to ask next, which is how, okay, let's take a quick break. And then when we get back, I want to get your thoughts on what happens if he doesn't get the interim tag taken off. So we'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets and Locked On Hurricanes. We're doing a Squadcast, talking all about John Waddell, and we're talking all about Carolina Hurricanes, because now it's their turn to look for a new GM. And Eric Tulsky is the name on everyone's lips, but I'm hearing, there's been a couple of rumblings and rumors about maybe he's not going to be the guy in Carolina. If they hire someone else over him, do you think he stays? Do you think he goes somewhere else? How do you feel that relationship is with Tulsky and Kane's upper management?
I think it's still a good relationship. I'm not saying it's 100% that he stays, but I think it's pretty high, probably about 80-20, 90-10 that he's going to stay, because he's been with the team for so long at this point. Tom Dundon really, values his input. He's someone that the Hurricanes have leaned on a lot, and he's got a lot of, the fact that Tulsky is in his hand, has his hand in a lot of player development, contract negotiations, trades and stuff like that. So it's he's been kind of been set up to hopefully be the GM at some point. And, it could be a situation where maybe he doesn't want to be the GM. Maybe he wants to be the guy behind the scenes and is okay with being the assistant general manager and, being able to, be part of, the decision-making without being the guy who has to go and talk to media all the time. So who really knows? It could be, I don't know what the exact situation is, but let's say he is the GM, then great. There you go. There's your guy. But if not, I could still see him stay in Carolina just because of how much he's valued by the organization. Because I don't think Dundon wants to give up the golden goose that is Eric Tulsky, because of just how analytically smart he is, and just the fact that he's got his hands in a lot of things that has helped build this team to where it is now. To, like I said earlier in the show, 6 straight playoff appearances, a lot of first-round wins and deep playoff runs. So no matter how it goes, I think you're going to see Tulsky in Carolina. It just depends on if he's the GM or the assistant GM. So it really depends. But I think the relationship is still good enough to where no matter how it goes, he's still going to be taking care of the Hurricanes in some sense.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about, obviously, the Hurricanes. I feel like, and this is someone who is kind of not an outsider necessarily, but someone who only kind of pays kind of peripheral attention to the Hurricanes, in as much as I pay attention to any of the other Metropolitan Division teams, because they're all my enemy.
Right.
Sudden playoff exit against the Rangers. Obviously, they dragged that series to 6 games, but it didn't really feel like a 6-game series. A lot of UFAs that need re-signing.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a year that Carolina takes a step back from kind of the stranglehold that they've had on the Eastern Conference for the last couple of seasons?
Oh, geez, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot more UFAs than you kind of want, because the fact that you're looking at Stefan Nason, who's, he's a bottom 6 guy, and I use that in air quotes because he plays top power play minutes. I mean, you're looking at Jalen Chatfield, you're looking at Brady Shea, Brett Pesci. There's another defenseman, Tony DeAngelo, but that's here and there. Yeah. You're also looking at Teuvo Teravainen. You also get your Jay Gensel. You look at your RFAs of Natchez and Jarvis and Jack Drury, and also Jacob Slavin is up for an extension, so he could get an extension this summer too. And I know Elliot Freeman had said that Jacob Slavin and Seth Jarvis are both in their top 3 of the Hurricanes' priorities this offseason. So yeah, maybe there could be a slight step back depending on who they possibly keep, who they go get in free agency. I could still see them being a playoff team next year in terms of being the Carolina Hurricanes that we've seen for the last 6 seasons. Yes and no. Like I said, it just depends on who they go get and how it all works. So I still think you're going to see them do what they usually do, forecheck teams to death, put a lot of pressure on them and stuff like that, and just being a structurally sound defense, and it just it's definitely one of those off seasons where I feel a little bit more unsure than I usually do, because the last few years you're like, okay, you got to add a piece here. Okay, you let Nedeljkovic walk, you let Mrazek walk, but you bring in Anderson and Ranta. Now it's kind of like, okay, your goalies are set, most of your forwards are set, and some of your defense. But now it's like, okay, we got 3 guys that are UFAs on defense. You got a lot of forwards that are going to be UFAs. You got RFAs. Where do you go from there? And you don't really know what to expect, because and I always bring up Friedman because he's really good at what he does, and he's a great reference point. He said that there's some good things happening between either Shea or Pesce. What that means, I don't know. Maybe it's a contract. Who really knows? But it's a lot of uncertainties. They make you kind of like, I kind of want to be excited for next year, but I'm also kind of like cautious of like, okay, what are we looking at for next season? So yeah, I'm basically like almost got like that anxiety as a hockey fan of like, okay, what's next? What's going to happen? I don't know. And then when you get asked that question of like, oh, so how do you think the team's going to be? Your guess is good as mine. So I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, they could be the same team that has a stranglehold, but you can see a lot more faces that it's like, all right, I guess we'll see how it goes. We'll buckle in. Let's have some fun, I guess.
I was going to say, at the end of the day, you have no power over what this team does, so you might as well just kind of enjoy it or not.
Instead of causing chaos, embrace the chaos, I guess.
Yes,
there's your new hashtag for next year, embrace the chaos.
Excellent. Get that on a t-shirt. I want to finish off just talking a little bit more about the Blue Jackets. With the addition of Don Waddell, knee-jerk reaction. Obviously, the goal is for the Blue Jackets to be better than they were this season, but like that's a low bar to clear because they were miserable this season.
I predicted you guys to finish 6.
I predicted to finish 4th, and then they basically pooped all over my prediction. The Metro was a disaster this season, but it's fine.
Thanks a lot, Philadelphia.
Do the Blue Jackets turn into a potential wild card playoff team under Waddell, do you think, this season? Just knee-jerk reaction.
Knee-jerk reaction, yes. I do think they will. Because you got to look at it, too. A lot of guys were hurt. And, you lose Rowinski multiple times. You feel bad for that guy. He's one of my favorite Jackets. I hate to see it for him. He gets hurt. You lose Adam Fantilli with a cut on his leg. You lose other guys. You lost Boone Jenner for a good little bit too. And it's just kind of like, then you got guys bouncing up and down from Cleveland. And I know Deanna and everyone was having, panic attacks and going, all right, we got a Calder Cup run. Please stop stealing our guys. Gauntz and all them too. And of course, in goaltending was helter skelter, if I want to put it
it was a time. It was an experience.
It was a time. But I think if you get a little bit more stability, maybe less injuries, you get, bring in some guys that, could probably show up more of some scoring on the offense, get some playmaking done, kind of. I know the contracts are tough with, Severson and, one of the other guys that you brought in, I just completely mind blanked on them. Yeah, Provorov. If you figure out what to do with those contracts, maybe some retentions, or maybe figure out how you're going to get those guys to work. Pascal Vincent, too, I'm really kind of like, I don't know about that quite yet, depending on if they're going to keep him around, too. So, knee-jerk, I think the right moves, I think you could get it done. And with how the Metro is right now, they could have a shot, because I don't know how Philly's going to do. I don't know if the Flyers are going to do the same thing again. You saw how the Capitals did, and Pittsburgh is, who knows what Pittsburgh is, and the Devils kind of fell back to earth. So it's a good knee-jerk. I think it's a good possibility if you get the right things that fall into place, and you get guys who are mostly healthy, and you just got to figure out contracts on the defense, and you got to hope goaltending and just figure it out. You got to hope goaltending and figure it out. Jet Graves, Jet, you gotta hope he takes off. No pun intended, but it's just, it's knee-jerk. I think they can do it, but it's going to be a climb.
It's going to be an interesting offseason for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But hey, you got Don Waddell. You saw what he did. He turned the Hurricanes franchise around that saw 10 years of no playoffs, and he saw how the darkness was for 4 years, and then in the last 6 turned around to where it is now. So hey, it's not impossible. It's going to be a process, but you can see from the track record that he has, and I know a lot of people bring up Atlanta. Nothing you can do in your ownership group is more interested in fighting with themselves than anything else. So I wouldn't hold Atlanta against them too much, but I think you got a good one in Don Waddell. So
if we get 6 years like the Hurricanes had for the last 6 years, it feels like it's all been worth it,
I mean, even 3, just get 3 years. Just even get 3 years as a starter. That's at least something. It's at least something.
If people want to catch up with the Hurricanes, if they want to get maybe some more information on Don Waddell, I know you've been talking a lot about him on your show this week, doing great work. Where can people find you and your stuff online, Zach?
Yeah, of course. You can follow me on X at OneTrueZach. You can follow the podcast at LO_Hurricanes. I do have a link tree in my bio on my Twitter account or X account, whatever you want to call it at this point. I don't know. You can find out where to find my articles at the Hockey Writers, of course, working with you over at the Calder Times if you want some AHL stuff. Search Cast, my other Hurricanes podcast. You can listen, subscribe, and on YouTube and all that. And then for the same thing for Locked On Hurricanes, you can find the podcast. There's links there, and also on the YouTube side of things. We're slowly getting to 1,000 subscribers, so it'll be kind of nice to get there because it'd be nice to do something really cool for the fans. But yeah, there's a link tree. You can find all my links and stuff like that where to listen, to watch, and all that good stuff too. So yeah,
awesome. Well, you can find me online at Jacob_Foster and. That's not my URL. I just feel like my URL on here is wrong. Okay. Well, I'm going to edit it. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets on Twitter, on Instagram. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Make sure Locked On Hurricanes is your second listen of the day. You can find both shows on any podcasting app of choice. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Sirius XM. Thank you once again from me and Zach for being one of our everydayers. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.